Terry Collins screamed as the insectoid Voth torturer pierced his flesh with a neural spike. Not knowing his defiance would spark a horrible backfire for his alien captors, battered human knuckles strained against the restraints, blood crusting the metal shackles. The shadowed chamber stank of ozone and singed skin. Commander Quasar loomed over the captive soldier, compound eyes glinting. Your world called you a hero. The medals on your uniform speak to that lie. Where are those accolades now, human? You are nothing. Your species is weak, fragile. Earth will be ours. Your people slaves to the Voth Empire. This was simply a doomed last stand. Fluorescent fluid dripped from a laceration on Terry's brow, the wound sustained in his futile defense of the colony. He had battled fiercely, pulse rifle spitting defiance, until a seismic grenade had catapulted him into a crater. Semi-conscious, he was swarmed by a dozen elite Voth troopers. You underestimate us. Terry gathered bloody saliva and spat in Quasar's twitching mandibles. Humanity will never surrender. The Voth's serrated claw lashed out, talons shredding Terry's cheek. Your insolence has earned you a fate worse than death. Take him to the resonance chamber. I want the location of every human colony, every fleet movement, every defensive installation. Break his feeble body, then bring me his mind. As the guards dragged his limp frame through the blast doors, Terry curled his fingers around the makeshift distress beacon fashioned from scavenged Voth circuitry. He felt it pulse to life against his bruised palm. All he had to do was survive. Survive and pray that the encrypted signal reached the Terran fleet. Because if it didn't, if he broke, humanity would fall. Earth would burn. Terry gritted his teeth as a fresh wave of agony ripped through his body. The resonance chamber awaited, a nightmare of suffering no soul had endured. But he would hold the line, or mankind would pay the price. Terry's vision blurred as a fresh wave of torment tore through his body. Lieutenant Zix, a vicious insectoid with a reputation for brutality, stood over him, compound eyes glinting with sadistic glee. Neural probes pierced Terry's skull, sending searing pulses of agony through his brain. Chemicals coursed through his veins, a cocktail of mind-altering drugs designed to break his will. But Terry Collins was no ordinary soldier. He had faced death countless times, had seen the worst humanity had to offer. He would not yield, not to these alien bastards. Is that all you've got? Terry spat, blood flecking his lips. Humanity has endured worse than this. The Black Death, the World Wars, the collapse. We always come back stronger. Zix chittered in frustration, increasing the intensity of the neural probes. Terry's body convulsed, muscles straining against his restraints, but his mind remained unbroken, a bastion of defiance in the face of unimaginable suffering. The Voth interrogators exchanged baffled looks. They had never encountered a species with such resilience, such unwavering resolve. Terry's taunts only fueled their determination to break him. As the torture reached new heights of savagery, Terry's mind began to drift. Memories of his family flooded his consciousness, his wife's smile, his daughter's laughter, the small farm they had built together on the colony world. In his delirium, Terry murmured a name, New Haven. The words slipped out before he could stop them, a momentary lapse in his iron control. Commander Quasar, observing the interrogation from a monitor, leaned forward in his seat. New Haven? He turned to his tactical officer. What do our scans show? The officer tapped at his console. There's a small human military installation on the far side of the colony, sir. Heavily fortified. It could pose a significant threat to our invasion plans. Quasar's mandibles twitched in anticipation. Dispatch a strike force immediately. We'll crush this New Haven before the humans even know what hit them. Light years away, a battered human ship received Terry's distress beacon. Captain Jack Hawkins, Terry's closest friend and brother-in-arms, read the encrypted message with a grim expression. As the human ship plotted a course for the Voth stronghold, Terry screamed in agony, unaware that help was on the way. He had to hold out, had to keep the Voth focused on him, because if he broke, if he revealed the true extent of humanity's defenses, Earth would fall. And that was a price Terry Collins was not willing to pay. As the Voth assault ship screamed towards the hidden human base, Captain Hawkins gripped his pulse rifle. His stealth ship, running on stolen alien tech, glided silently through space towards the enemy dreadnought. "Listen up," Hawkins barked. "Terry is on that ship and we're not leaving him behind, but we make this quick and clean, no heroics by the numbers." His battle-hardened squad nodded, faces grim. The stealth ship shuddered as it latched onto the Voth hull. Cutting torches sliced a hole, and the humans dropped into the dim interior. Insectoid guards clicked in alarm, but Hawkins's team opened up, plasma rounds shredding carapace. They moved fast, taking down patrols with brutal efficiency. The ship's layout downloaded into their HUDs, guiding them to the interrogation level. As they breached the final blast door, a shout rang out. "Terran scum!" Lieutenant Zix reared up from Terry's twitching form, a syringe in his claws. The needle plunged into Terry's neck, pumping venom. Zix fell a second later, his head a ruined mess from Hawkins's shot. "I've got you, brother." Hawkins hauled Terry over his shoulders in a fireman's carry. His friend shuddered, eyes rolling back. "Corpsman! Antidote now!" As the medic worked frantically to stabilize Terry, the comms crackled. "All units, human base located, commencing orbital bombardment." Hawkins cursed. The Voth were going to level the colony. He made a snap decision as they raced back to the stealth ship. "Ramos Sian, get Terry out of here. The rest of you with me. We're not letting those Voth bastards take New Haven without a fight." The defenders were already scrambling as drop pods rained from the sky. Plasma turrets roared to life. Lancing the first wave, but more kept coming, disgorging Voth shock troops. The aliens surged forward, heedless of losses, laying down a withering barrage. Hawkins's squad hit their flank like a hammer, pulse rifles on full auto. Caught off guard, the Voth line buckled. A savage melee erupted, human grit pitted against alien ferocity. Hawkins fought like a man possessed, Terry's broken body still vivid in his mind. Voth warriors fell before his onslaught, ichor spraying. The humans rallied behind him, a defiant cheer rising from the barricades. The colony guns thundered with renewed vigor. But the Voth kept coming, heedless of losses. For every insectoid that fell, 3 more took its place, Quasar throwing lives away in a bid to crush the human resistance. The tide of battle hung in the balance, the fate of New Haven, and perhaps humanity itself, to be decided in the blood and thunder of the next few hours. Terry gritted his teeth as the medic finished injecting the antidote, the burning sensation spreading through his veins. His body ached, his mind reeled from the torture, but he pushed himself to his feet. He had to fight. He couldn't let his fellow soldiers stand alone. Hawkins put a hand on his shoulder. "Terry, you're in no condition." "I have to do this, Jack." Terry's eyes blazed with determination. "I know the Voth. I know how they fight. You need me out there." Hawkins hesitated, then nodded. He understood. Every soldier counted in this battle. Terry grabbed a pulse rifle and joined the fray. His body moved on instinct, his training taking over. He shouted orders, directing the human forces to target the weak points in the Voth's armor. "Aim for the joints. Their exoskeletons don't cover those areas." The human soldiers adjusted their fire, plasma rounds searing through the gaps in the Voth's defenses. The insectoid warriors fell, their advance faltering. Terry fought like a man possessed, his rifle spitting death. He could see the fear in the Voth's compound eyes, the realization that the humans were more than just prey. Under Terry's guidance and Hawkins' leadership, the tide began to turn. The Voth were pushed back, their lines crumbling. Quasar, watching from his command ship, slammed his claw on the console. "Retreat," he hissed. "Pull back to the drop zone. We need to regroup." As the Voth fell back, Terry sagged against a barricade, exhaustion taking hold. Hawkins was at his side in an instant, supporting him. "We did it," Terry rasped. "But it's not over. Quasar won't give up that easily." Hawkins nodded grimly. "What's our next move?" Terry's eyes took on a haunted look. "While I was in that chamber, I overheard the Voth talking. They have a secret weapon, Jack, something they've been working on for years. What kind of weapon? A super soldier. They've been combining Voth DNA with the humans they've captured, trying to create the perfect warrior. If they succeed... Hawkins's jaw tightened. He knew what that meant. The human colonies wouldn't stand a chance. We need to warn Earth Command. They have to know what we're up against. Terry nodded, his face grim. There's more. When I was on that ship, I managed to access some of their data files. I didn't have time to go through everything, but I downloaded what I could. Hawkins' eyes widened. You mean you might have intel on this super soldier project? Possibly. We need to analyze the data, see if there's anything we can use. Hawkins helped Terry to the command center, where the installation's scientists were already hard at work. They pored over the files, searching for any weakness in the Voth's technology. As they worked, Terry's mind raced. The Voth were planning something big, something that could change the course of the war, and he had a feeling that New Haven was just the beginning. The command center erupted into a flurry of activity as the reinforcements from Earth Command arrived. Sleek warships, bristling with advanced weaponry, settled into orbit around the embattled colony. Dropships ferried soldiers and equipment to the surface, bolstering the beleaguered defenders. Among the new arrivals was Dr. Lena Sorensen, a xenobiologist renowned for her expertise on the Voth. She strode into the command center, her sharp eyes taking in the controlled chaos. Captain Hawkins, Sergeant Collins. She shook their hands firmly. I've been briefed on your situation. Let's get to work. In the laboratory, Dr. Sorensen pored over the data Terry had retrieved, her brow furrowed in concentration. She worked tirelessly, running simulations and analyzing genetic sequences. There! She pointed to a display, excitement in her voice. The Voth have made a critical error in their genetic engineering. They've left a vulnerability in their super soldier's DNA, a weakness to a specific electromagnetic frequency. Terry leaned in, hope flickering in his eyes. Can we exploit it? Dr. Sorensen nodded. We'll need to develop a specialized weapon, but yes, I believe we can. As the scientists and engineers worked feverishly to create the new weapon, disturbing reports began to filter in. Long-range sensors had detected a massive Voth fleet massing in a nearby nebula, far larger than any force previously encountered. Hawkins slammed his fist on the console. They've been playing us this whole time they were preparing for a final assault. Terry's jaw tightened, and I bet they've got those super soldiers ready to deploy. The colony's defenses were quickly fortified, soldiers manning every gun emplacement and barricade. The new weapon, a pulsing array of electromagnetic emitters, was hastily integrated into the colony's power grid. As the Voth fleet emerged from the nebula, a swarm of drop pods and assault ships descending on the colony, Terry turned to Hawkins. I have an idea. If we can get a team inside their flagship, we might be able to sabotage their systems from within. Buy our people some time. Hawkins nodded grimly. It's a long shot, but it might be our only chance. Assemble your team. As the battle raged above, Terry and his strike team boarded a captured Voth shuttle and slipped away from the colony. They docked with the enemy flagship, a monstrous vessel bristling with weapons. Plasma fire erupted in the corridors as they fought their way to the ship's core systems. Voth soldiers, their carapaces gleaming, swarmed to stop them. But Terry's team was relentless, driven by a fierce determination to protect their people. They reached the control room, a vast chamber pulsing with alien technology. As Terry's fingers flew over the unfamiliar controls, trying to disable the ship's defenses, a looming figure emerged from the shadows. Quasar, his compound eyes blazing with hatred, leveled his plasma rifle at Terry's head. You've been a thorn in my side for too long, human, he hissed, but no more. Today you die, and your pathetic species will follow. Terry slowly raised his hands, his heart pounding. The fate of the colony, of all humanity, hung in the balance. The next few moments would decide everything. Terry locked eyes with Quasar, his grip tightening on the plasma rifle. Time seemed to slow as they faced off, the fate of humanity hanging in the balance. "You've lost, human," Quasar hissed, mandibles twitching. "Your pathetic species will be crushed beneath the might of the Voth Empire." Terry's lips curled into a defiant snarl. "Not today, you bug-eyed bastard." He lunged forward, rifle blazing. Quasar moved with inhuman speed, his carapace deflecting the plasma bolts. The insectoid warrior closed the distance, lashing out with razor-sharp claws. Terry ducked and weaved, his combat training taking over. He slammed the butt of his rifle into Quasar's midsection, cracking the exoskeleton. The Voth commander staggered back, a screech of pain escaping his mouthparts. As the strike team fought their way through the ship's corridors, the sounds of battle echoed through the bulkheads. Plasma fire scorched the walls, the acrid stench of burning chitin filling the air. Terry led the charge, his knowledge of Voth systems allowing them to bypass security checkpoints and sealed blast doors. They moved with brutal efficiency, cutting down any resistance they encountered. But when they reached the main control room, a grim sight awaited them. The view screens showed the colony's surface, where the first wave of Voth super soldiers had already been deployed. The genetically engineered monstrosities tore through the human defenses like tissue paper, their enhanced strength and speed rendering them nearly invincible. Plasma fire glanced off their reinforced carapaces, the wounds healing almost instantly. Terry's heart sank as he watched the carnage unfold. He knew that the colony's defenders stood no chance against these abominations. His eyes fell on the central computer, a pulsing mass of alien technology, and in that moment he knew what had to be done. "The neural implants," he said, his voice grim. "They're controlled from here. If we destroy the computer, it should disable the super soldiers." The strike team exchanged glances, the weight of the realization settling over them. Destroying the computer would also mean disabling the ship's life support systems. They would be sealing their own fate. But Terry knew there was no other choice. The lives of every human on the colony, and perhaps the fate of humanity itself, depended on their actions. "Go," he said, his voice steady. "Get back to the shuttle. I'll handle this." The team hesitated, reluctant to leave their comrade behind, but the look in Terry's eyes brooked no argument. As they made their way back through the ship, fighting every step of the way, Terry turned to face the central computer. He raised his rifle, taking aim at the pulsing core. Quasar loomed over him, his compound eyes blazing with hatred. The Voth commander was battered and bleeding, but far from defeated. Terry rolled to his feet, fists raised. He knew he couldn't match Quasar's strength, but he had something the Voth could never understand. The two warriors clashed in a brutal melee, trading blows that would have shattered bone. Terry fought with every ounce of skill and tenacity he possessed, drawing on reserves of strength he didn't know he had. But Quasar was relentless, his attacks fueled by a seething rage. Terry felt his body failing, his vision blurring as the Voth's claws found their mark again and again. On the colony's surface, the battle raged on. The human forces were being pushed back, the super soldiers cutting a swath of destruction through their ranks. But just as all seemed lost, a new weapon appeared on the battlefield. Dr. Sorensen and her team had finalized the electromagnetic pulse emitter, a device designed to exploit the flaw in the super soldier's genetic coding. The weapon pulsed with energy, sending out waves of targeted radiation. And as the super soldiers were caught in its field, their movements faltered, their enhanced systems failing. The tide of the battle began to turn, the human forces rallying behind this new hope. They pushed forward, plasma fire concentrated on the now vulnerable super soldiers. But on the Voth flagship, Terry Collins fought on alone, battered and bleeding but unbroken. He stared into the face of his enemy, a smile on his split lips. "You made a mistake, Quasar," he rasped. "You underestimated us, you underestimated me." With a final desperate surge of strength, Terry launched himself at the Voth commander. They grappled in a tangle of limbs, rolling across the deck plates. Terry's hand closed around a shard of shattered metal, the edges razor-sharp. He brought it up in a vicious arc, the improvised blade sinking deep into Quasar's neck. Terry dragged himself to the central computer, his vision dimming. With the last of his strength, he slammed his fist into the pulsing core, feeling the energy discharge rip through his body. As the computer exploded in a shower of sparks and shattered components, Terry Collins fell to the deck, a smile on his face. He had done his duty. He had given humanity a fighting chance. And as the Voth flagship drifted lifeless in the void, the battle on the colony's surface turned in favor of the humans. The super soldiers fell, one by one, their systems failing as the electromagnetic pulse washed over them. The Voth forces, their greatest weapon defeated, began to retreat. The human soldiers cheered, their voices rising in a defiant roar. But amidst the celebration, a somber realization settled over them. The victory had come at a great cost. The strike team, Terry Collins among them, had given their lives to make it possible. They would be remembered as heroes, their sacrifice forever etched into the annals of human history. And as the colony began to rebuild, the survivors knew that they owed their lives to the bravery of a few. The battle was won, but the war was far from over. The Voth would return, their desire for conquest undiminished. But the humans would be ready, their resolve stronger than ever. For they had seen the best of humanity, the indomitable spirit that burned within them all, and they knew with unshakable certainty that no matter the odds, no matter the cost, they would never stop fighting. They would never surrender. Terry's fist slammed into Quasar's exoskeleton, the impact sending shockwaves of pain through his battered body. The Voth commander reeled back, ichor oozing from cracks in his carapace, but Quasar was far from defeated. With a hiss of rage, the insectoid warrior lunged forward, serrated claws slashing at Terry's face. The human soldier dodged, his reflexes honed by years of combat training. He countered with a vicious uppercut, his knuckles splitting against the hard ridges of Quasar's jaw. The two combatants grappled, rolling across the deck plates in a tangle of limbs. Terry's vision blurred, the edges of his consciousness fraying from blood loss and exhaustion. But he refused to yield, refused to let this alien bastard win. Quasar's mandibles clicked in frustration as he struggled to gain the upper hand. In a last-ditch effort to defeat his human adversary, the Voth commander disengaged from the melee and staggered to the ship's control console. "If I can't have victory," Quasar snarled, his claws flying over the interface, "then I'll have revenge." The ship's computer blared a warning, the lighting shifting to an ominous red. Terry's eyes widened as he realized what Quasar had done. The self-destruct sequence. Terry hauled himself to his feet, ignoring the screaming agony of his injuries. He limped to the console, shoving Quasar aside with a burst of adrenaline-fueled strength. His fingers danced over the alien controls, his mind racing as he tried to decipher the Voth technology. Seconds ticked by, each one bringing the ship closer to oblivion. With a triumphant shout, Terry inputted the final command. The self-destruct sequence aborted, the computer's power redirected to the central core. Quasar's compound eyes widened in horror as he realized what was happening. "No!" he screeched, reaching for the console. The central computer overloaded, energy cascading through its circuits in a blinding surge. On the colony's surface, the Voth super soldiers suddenly collapsed, their neural implants fried by the electromagnetic pulse. The flagship shuddered, explosions ripping through its hull. Terry, his strength fading, dragged himself to an escape pod. He tumbled inside, slamming the hatch closed just as the ship began to tear itself apart. The pod jettisoned, the force of the exploding dreadnought propelling it towards the planet's surface. Terry slumped against the bulkhead, his vision darkening. He had done it. The Voth were defeated, their greatest weapon destroyed. But at what cost? As consciousness slipped away, Terry's thoughts turned to his comrades, to Hawkins and the others. He hoped they had survived, hoped that his sacrifice had not been in vain. On the surface, Hawkins and his team watched in stunned disbelief as the Voth flagship exploded, a miniature sun blooming in the sky. Their hearts sank, fear for Terry's fate gripping them. But there was no time to mourn. The remaining Voth forces, now leaderless and without their super soldiers, began to retreat in disarray. The human defenders pressed their advantage, plasma fire scything through the alien ranks. The battle raged on, the tide turning inexorably in favor of the humans. The Voth, their will to fight shattered, broke and fled, their ships disappearing into the void. As the last of the enemy forces were routed, a battered escape pod streaked through the atmosphere, trailing smoke and debris. It crash-landed near the human lines, gouging a deep furrow in the earth. Hawkins and Dr. Sorensen raced to the pod, their hearts pounding. They wrenched open the hatch, dreading what they might find. But there, amid the wreckage, was Terry, battered, bloody, but alive. A triumphant grin split his face, despite the pain that racked his body. Hawkins laughed, relief flooding through him. "You know me," he said, helping his friend from the pod. "I like to make an entrance." The medics rushed Terry to the infirmary, where a team of doctors and nurses worked tirelessly to stabilize his condition. Dr. Sorensen oversaw the treatment, using her knowledge of Voth physiology to guide the medical staff. "He suffered severe trauma and blood loss," she said, her brow furrowed in concentration. "But he's a fighter. He'll pull through." As Terry drifted in and out of consciousness, his mind replayed the events on the Voth flagship, the desperate battle, the self-destruct sequence, the narrow escape. He had stared death in the face and lived to tell the tale. Days turned into weeks as Terry slowly recovered, his body healing from the wounds inflicted by Quasar's claws. The colony buzzed with talk of his heroism, of how he had single-handedly turned the tide of the battle. "You're a legend now," Hawkins said during one of his visits, a grin on his face. "The man who took down a Voth dreadnought." Terry shook his head, wincing at the movement. "I did what anyone would have done," he said. "What about the colony, the rebuilding efforts?" Hawkins sobered, his smile fading. "We're making progress," he said, but it's slow going. The Voth did a lot of damage." As Terry regained his strength, he threw himself into the rebuilding process. He worked alongside the other soldiers and civilians, clearing debris and repairing infrastructure. The work was hard, but it gave him a sense of purpose, a way to channel his restless energy. Dr. Sorensen and her team, meanwhile, pored over the remains of the Voth super soldiers, their advanced equipment probing the alien flesh and circuitry. They worked tirelessly, seeking any weakness or vulnerability that could be exploited in future conflicts. But even as the colony began to recover, disturbing reports began to filter in from other human settlements in the sector. Voth attacks, sudden and brutal, leaving devastation in their wake. Terry's jaw tightened as he read the reports, his fists clenching at his sides. The Voth's attack on the colony had not been an isolated incident, but rather part of a larger, coordinated assault on human territories. Despite his still healing injuries, Terry insisted on being part of the planning process for the counter-offensive. He spent long hours in the command center, poring over intelligence reports and tactical maps. "The Voth are targeting our supply lines," he said, pointing to a series of red dots on the map. "They're trying to cut us off, weaken us before they strike again." Hawkins, newly promoted to major, nodded grimly. "We need to hit them back," he said, "hard and fast before they can regroup." Together they developed a strategy to strike at the heart of the Voth's war machine. Terry's first-hand knowledge of Voth tactics and technology proved invaluable, his insights guiding the planning process. As the strategy took shape, Hawkins began assembling a team of the best soldiers from across the human colonies, men and women who had proven themselves in battle, who had the skills and the courage to take the fight to the enemy. They trained relentlessly, honing their combat skills and familiarizing themselves with Voth weaponry and equipment. Terry, still not fully recovered, pushed himself to the limit, determined to be ready for the mission. But as the team prepared for their most daunting challenge yet, Terry received a mysterious message on his personal comm unit. The sender was unknown, the signal encrypted. He opened the message with a sense of unease, his eyes widening as he read the contents. The sender claimed to have information about a secret Voth facility, a place where they were developing even more advanced super soldiers. Terry's heart raced as he read the coordinates, his mind already racing with the implications. If the information was true, if the Voth were indeed working on a new generation of super soldiers, then the stakes had just gotten even higher. He knew he had to investigate, had to verify the information before bringing it to Hawkins and the others, but he also knew that he couldn't do it alone. Terry's fingers hovered over the comm unit, a decision weighing heavily on his mind. To trust the mysterious informant, or to ignore the message and focus on the mission at hand. In the end, he knew there was only one choice. He had to pursue this lead no matter the risk. The fate of humanity, of every man, woman, and child in the colonies, depended on it. Terry took a deep breath, his finger tapping the reply button. The die was cast, the path ahead uncertain, but one thing was clear: the fight against the Voth was far from over. Terry's fingers trembled as he closed the mysterious message, his mind racing with the implications. A secret Voth facility, developing even more advanced super soldiers? The thought sent a chill down his spine. He knew he had to act, and quickly. Hawkins, his face etched with concern, leaned over Terry's shoulder. "What is it? What did the message say?" Terry took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. "We have a new mission, a covert operation to take out a Voth research facility. It's not going to be easy, but if we don't act now, the consequences could be catastrophic." Hawkins nodded grimly, his jaw set with determination. "Then we'd better get started. Assemble the team. We move out at dawn." The journey to the secret Voth facility was fraught with danger. Terry and Hawkins' team, handpicked for their skills and experience, navigated through hostile territory, evading Voth patrols and surveillance drones. Each step brought them closer to their target, and to the truth that lay hidden within its walls. As they approached the heavily guarded compound, Terry felt a sense of unease wash over him. Something about this mission felt different, more urgent than anything they had faced before. He pushed the feeling aside, focusing on the task at hand. The team split up, each member taking a different route to infiltrate the facility. Terry and Hawkins took point, their weapons at the ready, as they slipped through a narrow ventilation shaft. The sounds of Voth soldiers marching echoed through the metal corridors, their chittering language grating on Terry's nerves. They emerged into a dimly lit laboratory, the air thick with the stench of chemicals and decay. Terry's eyes widened as he took in the sight before him. Rows of stasis pods lined the walls, each one containing a twisted, misshapen form that was barely recognizable as either human or Voth. Terry stepped closer to one of the pods, his heart pounding in his chest. The creature inside was a grotesque fusion of human and Voth DNA, its flesh a mottled patchwork of scales and skin. Its eyes, one human and one compound, stared blankly ahead, devoid of any spark of life. As they delved deeper into the facility, the true nature of the Voth's experiments became clear. Data logs and research notes painted a picture of a desperate race, ravaged by a plague that threatened to wipe them out entirely. The Voth had turned to the humans, seeing in them a potential solution to their plight. But their methods were barbaric, their ethics non-existent. They had kidnapped and experimented on humans, using their genetic material to create hybrids that could withstand the plague. The cost in lives, both human and Voth, was staggering. Terry felt a wave of revulsion wash over him, mixed with a strange sense of pity. The Voth, for all their advanced technology and military might, were just as vulnerable as any other species. Their aggression, their cruelty, was born out of a desperate need to survive. As they reached the heart of the facility, Terry and Hawkins found themselves face to face with the Voth's lead scientist, a gaunt figure with cold, calculating eyes. Behind him stood a group of the most advanced hybrids, their bodies bristling with cybernetic enhancements and alien weaponry. "You've seen too much," the scientist hissed, his voice dripping with menace. "You cannot be allowed to leave this place alive." Terry hesitated, his finger hovering over the trigger of his rifle. In that moment of indecision, One of the hybrids lunged forward, its claws raking across his chest. Terry screamed in agony, his vision blurring as he fell to the ground. Hawkins let out a roar of fury, his rifle spitting plasma as he charged the remaining enemies. He fought with a savage intensity, his movements a blur of speed and power. The hybrids fell before him, their bodies shattered by the force of his blows. But the scientist, in a final act of desperation, activated a self-destruct sequence. Alarms blared throughout the facility, the countdown to oblivion echoing in Terry's fading consciousness. Hawkins scooped up Terry's limp form, cradling his friend's broken body as he raced towards the extraction point. The facility shuddered and quaked around them, explosions ripping through its foundations. They burst out into the open air, the stealth ship waiting for them. Hawkins carried Terry aboard, his face a mask of grief and rage. The rest of the team, battered but alive, followed close behind. As the facility erupted in a ball of fire, the ship streaked away into the night sky. The mission was a success, but the price had been too high. Terry, the heart and soul of their team, lay dead in Hawkins' arms. In the days that followed, the truth of the Voth's experiment spread like wildfire through the human colonies. The revelation of their desperate plight and the lengths they had gone to in order to survive sent shockwaves through the government and military. Some called for understanding, for a peaceful resolution to the conflict. Others demanded retribution, a final reckoning for the Voth's crimes against humanity. Hawkins, haunted by the loss of his friend and the terrible secrets he had uncovered, withdrew from the public eye. He resigned his commission, unable to bear the weight of his memories and the guilt that gnawed at his soul. The Voth, their military shattered and their hopes for salvation dashed, retreated to the farthest reaches of space. Their fate, and the fate of the human colonies, remained uncertain. A somber memorial service was held for Terry and the other fallen soldiers, their names etched into a gleaming wall of remembrance. Hawkins stood before the assembled crowd, his eyes hollow and his voice thick with emotion. "So we have paid a terrible price for our victory," he said, his gaze sweeping over the sea of mourners. "But we must never forget the sacrifice of those who gave their lives to protect us. We must honor their memory and the enduring resilience of the human spirit in the face of unimaginable adversity." As the service drew to a close, Hawkins placed a trembling hand on Terry's coffin, a final gesture of love and respect for his fallen friend. He knew that the scars of the conflict would never truly heal, that the weight of what they had endured would stay with him forever. But he also knew that Terry's legacy, and the legacy of all those who had fought and died alongside him, would live on. They had shown the universe the true strength of humanity, the unbreakable bond of brotherhood and sacrifice that had carried them through the darkest of times. And as Hawkins walked away from the memorial, his head held high and his heart heavy with grief, he knew that he would carry that strength with him always, a shining beacon of hope in a galaxy full of darkness and uncertainty. The years passed, and as the human colonies slowly recovered from the devastation wrought by the Voth, the memories of those who had sacrificed everything to protect them lived on. Terry Collins, the soldier who had given his life to destroy the Voth super-soldiers, was remembered as a hero, his name etched into the annals of history. But even as the colonies rebuilt and expanded, a new threat was brewing in the depths of space. Zaxa, a brilliant Voth scientist driven by an insatiable thirst for revenge, had been secretly continuing the work on the hybrid soldiers. In hidden laboratories and remote outposts, he perfected the hybridization process, creating creatures that were stronger, faster, and more deadly than anything humanity had ever faced before. And now, armed with an army of these mind-controlled abominations, Zaxor launched his attack on the human colonies. The first wave of hybrids descended upon the unsuspecting settlements like a plague, their grotesque forms twisted by Voth technology and human DNA. The colonial defenses, still weakened from the previous war, crumbled under the onslaught. In desperation, the military leadership turned to the only person they believed could help them, Jack Hawkins. Once a hero of the Voth War and Terry Collins' closest friend, Hawkins had become a reclusive and embittered man in the years since, haunted by the memories of those he had lost. When the military envoys arrived at his remote cabin, Hawkins initially refused to join the fight, his eyes hollow and his voice rough with disuse. "I'm done with war," he growled, turning his back on them. "Find someone else." But then news reached him that Zaxa's forces had attacked the very colony where Terry's memorial stood, the gleaming obelisk that bore the names of the fallen now stained with the blood of the innocent. Something within Hawkins snapped, the old fire rekindling in his eyes. He gathered a small team of veterans, men and women who had fought alongside him and Terry in the past, and set out to confront Zaxa. They struck at the heart of the Voth's operation, a hidden base on a remote moon, fighting their way through hordes of mind-controlled hybrids. In the central command room, Hawkins finally came face-to-face with Zaxa. The Voth scientist, his exoskeleton withered and his eyes glinting with madness, laughed as Hawkins trained his weapon on him. "You're too late, human," Zaxor hissed. "My creations are unstoppable, and I have saved the best for last." With a gesture, Zaxor summoned his ultimate weapon. Hawkins' eyes widened in horror as a familiar figure stepped from the shadows, its form twisted by Voth technology, but still recognizable. Terry Collins, or what had once been Terry Collins, stared back at him with cold, dead eyes. "I used his genetic material harvested during his captivity to create the perfect soldier," Zaxor gloated. "And now he will be your doom." Hawkins hesitated, his weapon lowering for a fatal moment as he stared into the face of his friend. The Terry hybrid, its mind twisted by Zaxa's control, lunged forward, striking Hawkins with a blow that sent him crashing to the floor. As Hawkins lay there, blood pooling beneath him, he looked up at the creature that had once been his closest friend. In its eyes he saw no recognition, no humanity, only a blank, murderous obedience. With a shaking hand, Hawkins reached into his vest and pulled out a small cylindrical device, the detonator for the explosives his team had planted throughout the base. "I'm sorry, Terry," he whispered, his thumb hovering over the button. "I'm sorry I couldn't save you." He pressed the detonator, and the world erupted in flame. The explosions ripped through the base, consuming the hybrid army, Zaxa, and the abomination that had once been Terry Collins. Hawkins closed his eyes as the fire rushed towards him, a final silent apology on his lips. In the end, the threat was ended, but at a terrible cost. The human colonies were safe, but their greatest heroes had fallen. Terry Collins, the soldier who had sacrificed everything to save humanity, and Jack Hawkins, the man who had given his life to finish what his friend had started. Their names would be remembered, their stories told to generations yet to come, a reminder of the courage and sacrifice that had bought humanity's survival. You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.